Oh yeah, okay, explain it. So decatastrophizing is that's what you need to do when the fear is realistic. So in this case, because that fearful situation may happen, so we want to prepare your client so that when it really happens, they can be ready to deal with it and they can cope with it. So a good example is in your textbook, 113, page 113. There is a guy who has relationship problems with his wife. That's his second marriage. And then they are having a lot of arguments and fights, and this 52-year-old man thinks that like his first marriage, the second marriage is about to fail. And looking into his situation and listening to his statements is not impossible. It may happen. Yeah. So in that case, how do we help them? So we try to deal with the catastrophe that's actually that's likely to happen. So how do we deal with that? We try to discuss what kind of resources and support will still happen even after the divorce, the possible divorce. And also, a lot of times the patients may think that I cannot handle it, right? They are already overwhelmed by their own conclusion that I won't be able to handle it. I didn't handle it nicely last time, and this is second time again I cannot handle it. Or now I'm much weaker, it's not going to be handled very nicely. So they have all these notions, and their automatic thoughts are already working. So you want to identify their automatic thoughts about this difficult situation and then correct them, and then also try to see if it's going to be really disastrous situation, or maybe let's sit down and discuss and think about it. Actually, it may not be. I may have more resources than I thought. So in Terry's case, he realizes that, you know, I may not have a wife, but I still have a sister, so I will still have my other family members. And then it's not going to be the end of the world. Actually, after some time, I may be better off without this failing marriage anyway. So there are many ways to deal with the catastrophic situation differently when they correct their automatic thoughts and distorted cognition, and then when they check their resources. So that's the catastrophizing. And it's used a lot for anxiety patients as well, especially panic patients. Probably it's going to be modeled in the afternoon, in the later part of the class today as well, that panic patients, they have a lot of catastrophic thinking style. For a normal person without panic disorder, I mean, it's embarrassing if you have to, if you get really nauseous because of panic attack and if you have to leave the room. It's embarrassing, but it's not a disaster or catastrophe. But panic patients, it will be. So in that case, you sit down and think about, is it really going to be that much of catastrophe? Or is it really going to be something beyond your coping strategy, really something you cannot handle? Is it going to be really the end of the world? A lot of people have social anxiety. They think that if they make one mistake on the podium, that's it, end of the world. Everybody will make the judgment about me. But instead of that, you sit down and think about, is it really? So really they are all so attentive? Are they going to even notice? Maybe some of them even don't notice, and they are just like looking at, oh, when is it going to be over? Or they worry about, or they may be having their cell phone under the table. they are maybe tired or thinking about something else. It's just a lot of times their catastrophic thinking is not realistic. So with the therapist's help, they can gradually realize that actually a lot of disaster they were imagining is not really much of a disaster. And then there's re-attribution, which I'm sure you learned in Psych 100 class, the attribution theory, one of the most famous social psychology theory. So actually it's such an important concept. There have been thousands of studies about this attribution pattern. So what's internal and external pattern of attribution? What is internal? They tend to seek reasons inside of them.
Themselves.
Right. And then external is they tend to seek reasons outside of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then general or global is they tend to think the pattern of happenings, it tend to be consistent to all over the different domains of their life.
Right.
And specific is they tend to think, oh, it's just one time. And invariant and stable is like, I'm always this way. Variable or unstable is, oh, it's just specific one time. So the famous study about gender differences is that when a woman's successful, they tend to think it's external.
Mm.
Oh, I was lucky. And they tend to think it's specific at this time only. I'm not going to be successful that much next time. And this is also like unstable, only this time, not in other field or not in other time. And actually there was huge gender difference. Men tend to think exactly opposite.
I made this up.
Yeah. They tend to think
There's
it's
something about me.
internal, and they tend to think it's I'm just like capable all over, and they tend to think I'm gonna be always successful.
So it hits them really hard when they're not. Yeah. Because it goes right to the internal depth of identity.
Yeah.
It's really hard for men.
Yeah. So, but then people who are depressed, they tend to think kind of self-blame way of finding reasons, almost unrealistically.
Yeah.
So they when bad thing happens, it's all because of them, internal, and it's always like them, and in all areas of their life. I'm always this way in everything, and it's all because of me not being really capable or not being successful. So you will see this kind of pattern a lot in depressed people. And then when you recognize this attribution pattern, you want to correct them, and it's not going to happen in one session. You repeat and repeat and repeat. So your textbook has a great example of Sandy, 54-year-old woman. She was blaming herself about her married daughter's affair, which I think is kind of a stretch.
Yeah.
But she has her rationale is that like I have not been guiding my daughter well about college choice. Like throughout her life, I have not been a good guidance for my daughter. So she has this rationale. So in your textbook, there's a pie graph after reattribution in page 117. The pie graph method is very useful actually in many cases. So in this pie graph on 117, they did the reattribution work with the therapist and Sandy, the client, And then now, before it was all because of her, but now what? There are many different, more reasonable reasons why it happened. So, yeah, after reattribution, me was only 10%. So, actually, studies show that people with depression, they are more realistic. They are actually accurate.
Really?
Yeah, they are more accurate in terms of their control or their success. When you have healthy people with no depression and depressed people with depression, and then let them do the task, and then ask them how successful they were, actually depressed people had more accurate assessment of their success rate. And people without depression, they are more like optimistic, positive about their success rate. So it is interesting. A lot of evolutionary psychologists, why do we have depressed people, so many of them? And we may need them in the survival of the group because they are more realistic. But yeah, realistic and accurate or not, it feels horrible to the individual. So as a therapist, you want to kind of their extreme way of attribution toward a little bit of less extreme. So that's the reattribution technique. And then there's cognitive rehearsal, which also is a very useful technique. So it's like you practicing the therapy session. So people with depression, they have a lot of fear about being assertive, or a lot of fear about something that might happen in the near future and they may not be able to handle it. So you can practice in the therapy session in a safe place. You can practice actually multiple times, this version or that version, and you can be the role player. If they are afraid of talking to their boss, and then you can be the boss and let them practice in the therapy session. That's the cognitive rehearsal. So we want to identify possible automatic thoughts and the behavior. So we have the scenario, the usual scenario. Your client will say, okay, I have to confront my father, and looking back the history of what happened whenever I try to confront my father, this will happen. And then I will think this way, and I end up behaving this way. And that's the scenario. And then now you want to modify the automatic thoughts by writing out thought change record or doing other CBT intervention. So you change their automatic thoughts. Then let them think about a different way of things could happen, not like in the past, after they correct automatic thoughts and reflecting on their past behavior. And then rehearse the more adaptive way, the alternative way of thinking and behaving in your mind. And then practice it in the therapy session. A lot of times, once is not enough. You can practice many times. And then implement the new strategy. So in the video clip, you can watch this. Chris is practicing the rehearsal of the his difficult situation. So after we kind of go through this chapter 5, I want you to do role play, depending on how much time we have, because
you might want to temporarily stop it.
Yeah.